Loki Season 2! Welcome to the party! You've seen episode 1. We can finally talk about it. I've been dying to talk to you about it since I watched my screener. We have so much to discuss. I'm going to map some things out for you, a couple of observations, things I absolutely adored about the episode, and I'm dying to hear your thoughts as well, because I was surprised that the RT score wasn't as strong as I would have anticipated, considering how much I love the show. And I'm curious if it's maybe like a little bit of superhero Marvel fatigue, or if maybe the show just isn't for everyone. But wow, it sure is for me. It's like the show was personally made for me, and I'm having such a good time. So let's go! Isn't it refreshing, by the way, to see a Disney Plus show, or any streaming show for that matter? It's rare to start a season with a big VFX-heavy sequence right in episode 1. Oh boy! Yes, Loki Season 2 made the very wise choice to cash the check that the end of Season 1 wrote. I mean, He Who Remains promised pandemonium if he was killed, so here we are, pandemonium. It's cats and dogs living together, right? Like from Ghostbusters. Oh, it was great. With the death of He Who Remains, the timelines are rapidly branching. Now, are they branching out of control, or are they finally allowed to be free? That's an important moral quandary that B15 presents quite well, I might add. I wonder if her future's going somewhere. And that's not a spoiler, by the way. I genuinely don't know. Because, again, I've seen the first 4 episodes. Don't worry, I'm being very careful about not tipping my hand on what I do know that you won't know yet. But the moral quandary is going to be an important part of Season 2 overall, and I think that's great. Because, that was a lot of what Season 1 was kind of about, with Sylvie saying, what right do you have to prune her? And so they're kind of expanding that to be a broader conversation, which I think is great. Now, on top of that, with the truth about the TVA exposed, its agents, or at least most of them, are no longer willing to prune. So you have all these rapidly branching timelines, and no one's willing to try and impose order. So the temporal loom, which binds all the timelines together in a manageable way, can't handle the bigger load and threatens to explode, which could destroy the TVA, everyone inside, and who knows what else will happen. I think they've really done a good job stacking the deck. I think it's great. Oh yeah, plus Loki is the messenger of He Who Remains warning. Quite the herald Loki makes, shouting to anyone who will hear that more of He Who Remains, more Kangs are now coming. And this guy's variants will be even worse. And as Loki said, maybe this guy was the devil. He's not sure. Oh, and by the way, on top of all that, the cherry on the sundae is that Loki is time slipping. Oh, I love the visuals on this. This was great, which is the main problem of episode 1. Gives it even more a sense of urgency. It's great. You're allowed to have this huge sense of urgency for the episode, but since there's 2 things, the destruction of the temporal loom and Loki time slipping, you're able to resolve one by the end of this episode, fixing Loki's issue, but still have an overall problem hanging over the entire season. Oh, it's very well written, extremely well written. All right, so let's dive in here. First off, kudos to the new creative team, who not only picked up where Season 1 left off, and that was a tall order in and of itself, but they actually managed to elevate the show in every possible manner. You know how I would describe Loki Season 2? I thought about it after rewatching episode 1 to do my notes for this. I would say it's Wes Anderson sci-fi meets the Muppets, and that's just perfect. Wes Anderson's longtime collaborator, Owen Wilson, of course, helps create that feel, but I think the meticulousness of the, like that, I use that word in particular, of the production design, as well as the camera placement and movement and framing, where the characters are. Oh, it's great. That also reminds me of Anderson's work. Also a sense of whimsy, but also intellectualism. That's very Wes Anderson. Owen Wilson's like, hey, I co-write and star in some of that stuff. That's right, Owen Wilson, you do. But Huy Quan, who, by the way, turns out to be a fantastic fit with Anderson's vibe. I could see him in a future Wes Anderson movie. His agent should make that phone call. But I think Quan also brings in Muppet-style zaniness. He's like Scooter meets Gonzo. Oh, I love it. I was going to add Bunsen Honeydew, but I don't think he's like Bunsen Honeydew, actually. I think I get more of a Scooter and Gonzo vibe off of Quan. But the duct tape moment, oh, that was so Muppets. I was in Disney World recently and I was on Muppets 3D again. That ride's been there forever. But I like it, and everything's always broken, and they're always making things go ahead anyway, and they're really fun. They have a good attitude about it. And so that just, to me, I was like, Muppets. I love it. And you know what? I shouted out the writing, the directing, all this other stuff, but also kudos to the editing team, because a big part of why the jokes land here is because of excellent editing. That duct tape joke in particular, that was great. But the episode also still retains a serious and thrilling feel. So that's really strong. So everybody just really put their best foot forward. As OB says, it's great to be part of a team. All right, so what's Tom Hiddleston doing during all of this, besides playing our dashing leading man? Well, he hits the ground running here, literally, and does a fantastic job creating a sense of urgency and panic. A lot of that's coming from him. Loki genuinely comes across as afraid. What could scare a god? Oh, I love it. I guess He Who Remains has also achieved to some degree godlike status. So another god. But Loki is not only genuinely afraid for himself, very much afraid for himself, but also for others, his friends, and just everyone on all the timelines in general, which I think shows tremendous personal growth already from season 1. I mean, that's a big deal for Loki, that he cares. So yeah, Loki is time slipping, right? At the end of season 1, we thought that he was in a different timeline, or the timeline had been changed. However, what we learn in episode 1 here is that the TVA, the timeline here has stayed the same, but Loki is actually in the past, way in the past, so far back that this is when He Who Remains was publicly the face of the TVA, and everyone there knew it. Great line, by the way, about how he remains, basically calling himself the last one standing. And Loki because, Mobius says that. And Loki says, well, what if he can back it up? And I love Mobius saying, well, that's terrifying. That was great. So many good lines this episode. So then when Loki comes to the present, Mobius, B-15, and Casey all don't remember seeing him in the past. Or how that crack in the floor got there. But OB can remember seeing Loki in the past. We'll talk more about that brilliant sequence in a moment. But this is important, this difference. These people can't remember Loki in the past, but OB can. Because that establishes that He Who Remains has been regularly wiping the minds of TVA agents, which is why they feel that there's no time in the TVA. Remember, Mobius always said that. He said, there's no time. Time works differently here. No, it doesn't. Your mind just keeps getting wiped. However, on the flip side, OB, who they establish has been abandoned in the lowest abasement can get for over 400 years, nobody's been wiping his mind because he's been forgotten about, which makes him extremely valuable, as he knows more about the TVA than any of the other regularly mind-wiped agents. In fact, OB literally, I love how much literally there is on this show. It's great. He literally wrote the TVA Handbook. Didn't you think it was fantastic when he tossed it behind him without looking and Loki just caught it? I wonder how many takes that took. That was fantastic. But pay attention to that handbook. It's actually incredibly important in season 2. I love it. So great. All right, so again, Loki is traveling through time, although his location stays the same. Not traveling through time, not through space, which is really cool. I love that when he finds himself in one room and then in the past, in the present, and the future of that room. I think that's so cool. The future scenes were also very neat on their own. You know what it felt like to me? It felt like the loading area for a ride that sets the tone, right? Like, we got to get out of here, everybody. And you're like, oh, this is going to be a good ride. I just know it. Or even like a theme park Halloween maze. If Disney Disney doesn't do that. That's Universal Studios' sweet spot. But if they wanted to get in there, a TVA maze, I think, could be pretty darn cool. And did you notice how much they focus on the cut on Loki's arm? That is a visual marker for you. Remember that. Put a pin in that. Remember that arm injury. All right. So I mean, no spoilers, but I want you to have the best experience possible. All right. So anyway, what does Loki learn with his time slipping? Quite a bit. And so do we. As I said, he learns that at one point, He Who Remains was the public face of the TVA, but it was covered over, in some cases literally, when when Loki reveals the original war room wall by burning away the timekeeper's mural that had been installed over it. I thought that was neat. I'm surprised you can prune like a physical object, but whatever. It was neat. It was a good visual. In the past, when he's in that room, he also hears a recording of He Who Remains talking to Renslayer and how they're working together. Oh, the plot thickens! We, of course, all suspected that because of these two characters' history in the comics. All right, speaking of working with He Who Remains, Loki also learned last season, but he talks about it this season, that Miss Minutes is in cahoots with He Who Remains and can't be trusted. And in this episode, we find out that she's offline. She's missing, which is particularly a problem because she's the AI central computer for the TVA and she runs everything. And so that's another reason that they're having so many problems. And in the very near future, when Mobius wrote Skin in the dust, that was at first just a funny joke because he was so worried because, OB said, your skin's going to all peel off if this doesn't go well. So it was a funny moment, but it actually ended up being great for the story. I love stuff like that. It has dual layers for the story. So Loki can tell that he's in the very near future because, that was just recently written. But he sees that seems things have not been fixed. The TVA is closer to destruction than ever. But that somehow Sylvie is there, right? That's why when they're successful and he is ripped from time and he's stopped from time slipping and pulled fully into the present, he immediately says we need to find Sylvie because she's not only central to what started this by killing He Who Remains, and she has some idea of what happened after that, and she can maybe fill in some of those blanks, but she clearly will continue to be a major factor here because she's at the TVA in the near future. And wasn't that a wonderful moment? I loved that. Loki was at his lowest moment. Like he was so sure he wasn't going to make it. He was like, this is it. And then who's there but his ex-girlfriend, who he's clearly still in love with, that he's been searching for. And she's happy to see him. I mean, that was just amazing. It was beautiful. And then he gets pruned, which he needed to be able to be fully, he had to rip himself from time by being pruned. I guess it's that moment before he ends up at the end of time so that he could be fully pulled into the present. But who pruned him, right? I know the answer, and don't worry, you'll be finding out relatively soon, and I can't wait to talk to you about it. All right, can Loki and Mobius find Sylvie before General docks? There was, they said they didn't do any reshoots, so they must have reworked this significantly in the scripting process. Because at one point, Dox was supposed to be another Sylvie variant, a Loki variant. But let's just say her character is very interesting, but that's not going to happen. But anyway. So she is very well cast if that had been the case. So I guess that idea made it all the way to casting because she was well cast. All right, so anyway, General Dox has gone rogue and raided the armory and taken a bunch of hunters with her. That was a very cool end shot. I mean, for a bunch of soldiers just carrying duffel bags, they looked super cool as they deployed through the time door. I was like, oh, that's great. That's really cool. Nice use of the dolly, in the cross movement, right? The moving in different directions. It was great. That's where the end credit scene finally comes in. I hope you caught it. It was great. It's the only end credit scene for the first 4 episodes, by the way. I kept looking, and I almost missed this one because they haven't done end credit scenes on Disney Plus in a while, but this was great. So Sylvie is in a branched timeline. That is specified because that means it's not supposed to be there according to old rules of the TVA. And she's in Broxton, Oklahoma, 1982. And Marvel Comics fans will smile at that city name because that was the closest town to Thor's New Asgard in the comics. See, the MCU placed New Asgard in Norway, but in the comics it was near Broxton, Oklahoma. By the way, it was eventually destroyed by the God of Hammers. It was just completely pummeled. And that would make it a great place for the old Sylvie, the way she was before in season 1, to hide out there. Remember, she would find places where there was an impending disaster that would kill everybody. And maybe that was her first inclination. Maybe she's just a little bit off, right? But she winds up, well, let's just say it doesn't get more peaceful than a McDonald's in 1982 Middle America. So remember, her whole life she has just lived in the shadow of destruction. And I loved her description, by the way, of what she usually had to eat. She would like it to be already dead and nothing with a face, please. I thought that was great. But of course, when she sees this here, she is drawn to the comfort of fast food. I mean, isn't everyone? That's why fast food is so successful. But I must say, 1980s McDonald's are particularly cozy. So this is great. This is just really great. Now, a couple of other things. Loki is wondering if maybe He Who Remains was right, that the timeline can't be allowed to run amok purely because it would allow for Kang variants who are bent on gaining absolute power, and therefore that leads to mass destruction. So I guess it's almost that impossible choice of like lives will be lost either way, but how can we save the most lives, right? And that maybe the He Who Remains was correct. He Who Remains spooked Loki good, boy. B-15, and she convinces Judge Gamble of this as well, they feel that the TVA now doesn't have the right to decide who should exist and who doesn't. So again, are they going to find themselves at odds potentially? But as Mobius points out, also, here's another wrinkle, telling everyone at the TVA, because B-15 wants to tell everybody what's going on. But Mobius says, oh, you're going to tell everybody that the gods aren't real and everything they ever believed in doesn't exist and that they have lives on the timeline? I mean, even when that starts to get out just in the conversations that we are having, I mean, are they opening up a can of worms here? You can see the thought entering some people's minds in the TVA. Even Mobius. Who are they really? What life does wait for them down on the timeline? I think that's interesting. And I'm wondering, they're not even really addressing that if there are variants for them. So do they have lives to choose from? I mean, that's really, do they have to go back to the one that they were ripped from maybe? Maybe that's why they don't get to choose. All right, so my favorite scenes, and I have 3 of them, and I'd love to hear your favorite scenes down below. So the elevator scene, meeting OB, and extracting Loki. Now let's go into them in detail. So the elevator scene. This is a short scene, but I just loved it so much. So well written, so clever. I need a Loki who remains was great. What a good line. And the description of time slipping, what it actually looks like. It looks like you're being born and dying at the same time. And then they pan to that poor woman stuck in the elevator with them for her opinion. And that was just a fantastic beat. It was just so good. Then meeting OB. Huy Quan is a fantastic addition to this show, a great sparring partner with Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston, yet he brings a third type of energy to their scenes. Instead of competing with Owen Wilson as a funny man, you would think that potentially they'd be repetitive, but that's not the case at all. To have Loki then go into the past, slip into the past, and have him and Mobius talking to OB at the same time on the show, but one's in the past and one's in the present, with OB connecting the conversations as he remembers his conversation with Loki as it happens in the past, he remembers it in the present in real time. I mean, that was like some Back to the Future level time travel storytelling. I just loved it. And also from a writing perspective, it was a great way to quickly figure out how to solve their problem and immediately have what they need. I mean, like Doc Brown would be proud. That was great. They're like, oh, what do you know? I do know how to fix time slipping. And hey, I have the device right here. That was just so great, so fun. Funny and clever, and it worked. As OB says, you can't argue with that logic. It makes perfect sense. Oh, and Loki being the one to actually give OB that nickname, right? When he says, oh, can I call you OB? Because he remembers that's his nickname. But then OB's like, oh, I like that. That was a very nice touch. I liked that quite a bit. Then extracting Loki. They're the stars of the show, yet they genuinely had me concerned that they wouldn't make it. I mean, like, they have to make it. I'm like, I've seen the trailer. There are other scenes. But I don't know. I guess when you're dealing with timelines and variants, you never quite know for sure. But that was just great. I was again, edge of my seat. For me, what really sold this scene sequence was the bromance. That Loki finally had a true friend in Mobius. I mean, I love that in season 1 when they were all hanging out at the end of time. They were a team, Mobius, Loki, and Sylvie. But he really, Sylvie eventually took on the girlfriend role. But maybe Loki just always kind of needed a friend. He's always been alone. And he finally has not only a true friend in Mobius, but Mobius is a really stand-up guy. What a great friend. I just love it. And OB kind of gets in on this bromance too, right? Like when he stalls the countdown at 3 by saying 3 twice. I thought that was great. Trying to give them as much time as he can, but still being responsible. He still pushed that button. OB, I can't believe you pushed the button. I loved the visual of Mobius' suit dissolving from all the time energy. I thought that was great. And it was so clever to throw Loki, have him slip into the future and not take the time stick with him to drop it, even though he really needs that to prune himself. And then when he's in the future, he's desperately searching for a time stick. Never around when you need one. I mean, that was really clever as well. In this sequence, it also occurred to me the second time I saw it that Tom Hiddleston really sold his desperation, while Owen Wilson really sold his hope, which makes them a fantastic counter, but also at the same time balanced to each other, which is maybe why they work so good as a pair of friends and as a team of TVA agents as well. It's great. And we'll talk about it more as the episodes progress, but I just love that. Finally, what are your thoughts on X5, new character? Nice gloves too, by the way. I was like, nobody else gets their name on their gloves. Maybe just X's do. But whoa, there's something weird about that guy, including his acting, I have to say. But as I said, I come to really like him, so just you wait. So what did you think of Loki Season 2, Episode 1? What do you think of it compared to Season 1? What do you think of it compared to other recent MCU Disney Plus shows? And was one episode enough for you to debut with? And do you agree with me that it's an HBO-style show? I sure think it is. Just wait till Episode 2 next week. Oh, I can't wait to talk to you about that one. But for now, let's talk Episode 1. Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.